What is going on, everybody? I am here at the Groveside Municipal Cemetery in Brooklyn, Ontario. I'm here to look for the grave of Andrew Martin, otherwise known as Test. For those of you who do not know who Test is or was, he was a former WWE superstar. So Andrew Martin was born March 17th, 1975 in Whitby, Ontario. From what some, people who lived in the area had told me, that they remembered Test being a bouncer at some of the bars and clubs in the Whitby, Oshawa area. This guy stood at about 6'6". Like, this guy was a beast. And it was while he was working as a bouncer at a bar in Toronto that Bret Hart just so happened to be there and noticed him and thought this guy had the look of a pro wrestler. So Bret Hart had offered to train him. So he went through some training, and then he went and did some further training from former NWA world champion Dory Funk Jr. Now that's a guy to get trained by. Dory Funk Jr. is the son of Dory Funk and is also the brother of Terry Funk. So, around 1998, he made his debut on Monday Night Raw during that time, that was the Attitude Era. So that was during like the whole Monday Night Wars that was going on between WCW with their Monday Nitro and the WWF, then now known as the WWE. So Andrew Martin made his debut around 1998, I guess, and he debuted as a bouncer for Motley Crue, who was doing a performance on Monday Night Raw. So now, at this time, like, Test is, like I said earlier, 6'6". About 270 pounds, I guess they billed him as. So he makes his debut, and later on that night, he comes down to the ring and he attacks Triple H. So that kind of aligned him with the faction that was called the Corporation, which was, the boss, Vince McMahon. That was his corporation, with the world champ at that time being The Rock, who was part of that faction. So he had, from what most people I'd say would remember about Test, was that he had that angle where he would play the on-screen boyfriend of Stephanie McMahon. So Stephanie McMahon being the boss's daughter. To me, I think that was his biggest exposure to the company, and he had a decent run with that. And then when that kind of ended, he, I guess, just wrestled in the singles department there, and didn't really have many angles until Trish Stratus came on the scene, and she would come out to the ring, and if any of you remember who Trish Stratus is, man, she is gorgeous. She is probably in her late 40s or early 50s now, and she's still gorgeous. So anyways, Trish Stratus would come to the ring and make, these announcements about, does anybody want to see some TNA? And if you don't know what TNA stands for, well, there's a few meanings, but she was insinuating something else. So she was saying, anybody want to see some TNA? And of course the crowd goes, of course, right? Because it's Trish Stratus. So when she introduces some TNA stood for Test and Albert. So Test would align himself in a tag team managed by Trish Stratus with another wrestler that was going by the name of Prince Albert. So TNA was Test and Albert. And for those Prince Albert, for those of you who do not know what a Prince Albert is, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you can use your Google and find that out yourself. But it has to do with a piercing in a certain spot on men. So Test had that angle with that tag team with Albert there. And I'm not sure, I can't remember off the top of my head how long that went on for, but, that came to an end. Nothing really went with it. And then he started, later on, started aligning himself with Stacy Keibler, who is another gorgeous WWE personality. Fun fact, Test was actually in a relationship with Stacy Keibler for maybe a few years, 3-4 years maybe. So he kind of traded in his, long blonde ponytail and leather pants, rock and roll star looking gimmick, where he just cut off his hair, wore it short. He had started wrestling with trunks. And he got into there was an angle there with Scott Steiner over the services of Stacy Keibler. That angle didn't really go anywhere either. But during the time that he was in the WWE, though, he did have a run with the Intercontinental title, so he was a one-time Intercontinental champion. But I think he had that for about a cup of coffee. He didn't have that title for very long, maybe 2 weeks. He held the European title. He held the Hardcore title twice, I believe. And he held the Tag Team Champion belts with Booker T. And this was during the Invasion angle where Vince McMahon eventually bought out WCW. So one thing I forgot to mention was that Test, like many other wrestlers, would refer to their fan base by a certain name. Like Hulk Hogan had his Hulkamaniacs, Edge had his Edgeheads, Jericho had his Jerichoholics, and Test had his Testicles. So, in about 2004, Test he had a injury to his neck where I guess it was just over the years of all the bumps and bruises and stuff that he was taking, right? So he had to go and get a steel plate put in his neck or something like that. And while he was at home recovering from his surgery, they had released him from his contract. And I guess during that time, I guess he wrestled on the independents. I think he made a few appearances for TNA, and I'm not talking about the TNA that we were talking about earlier, but this TNA was another promotion that stood for Total Nonstop Action. I think he made a few appearances there, and Test came back on the scene again when the WWE did a rebranding of ECW. And when he made his return, I thought that he looked a lot more jacked this time than he was before. Like, he was always a big guy. But yeah, when they did the rebranding of ECW, he made his comeback, and I think that was in about 2006. And I'm not sure how long he stayed, but I don't remember it being very long. And then I guess he just went back to the independent circuit. I think he went to Japan, but he never made his return to the WWE after that. So not long before his death, Test did an interview where he was talking about, wrestlers dying at a young age, and that he didn't want to become one of them. There's many wrestlers that, died at a very young age. Eddie Guerrero being one. Umaga being another. These guys were still in their 30s. So I'm not sure the extent of Test's substance abuse problems or anything like that. But on March 13th, 2009, a neighbor had reported to authorities that they noticed Test had been sitting on his couch motionless for many hours, just not moving. So when authorities showed up, they were able to enter his apartment by scaling his balcony, and they walked in, and there he was. He had already been deceased. When the toxicology report came out, it stated that he had died from an accidental oxycodone. I think I said that right. Oxycodone. Accidental overdose. And the thing about those kind of painkillers and stuff is that a lot of these wrestlers get hooked on it. A lot of the wrestlers get hooked on it because they don't have an off season like, the NFL or the NHL. They wrestle year round, and a lot of the times, if they are out on injury, sometimes they'll miss their big push. So just like I mentioned earlier, he was let go from his contract while he was recovering from his neck surgery. So a lot of these wrestlers, they get hooked on all of these pain pills, and they become dependent on it because they don't want to lose their spot. But if if you're someone that follows wrestling, you'll notice that there's a lot of premature deaths. Without further ado, the man of the hour, Andrew James Robert Patrick Martin, March 17th, 1975 to March 13th, 2009. So he died at age 33, just 4 days shy of his 34th birthday. May you rest in peace, man. Well, that's it for me, folks. Until another video. See ya.